Imagine a hero returning from war, only to find a snare instead of a home. My husband bought his victory with our daughter's blood, and now he walks on gold, feasting on his pride. I'm no traitor. I am reckoning, and I'm closing the net.
Forget marble statues. The ancient world was a grim spectacle, run by divine hunters who demanded human sacrifice and destroyed lives on a whim. We're peeling back the layers of their madness. This is Shroud of Lore.
Agamemnon stepped onto the purple fabrics, not knowing that each stride across the precious silk led him straight to a bath filled with his own hot blood. But that ending had not yet arrived. First, there was the homecoming. The beacon fires had announced his coming, a chain of flames stretching from Troy to Mycenae, each hilltop blazing the news of victory. The war was over. The king was returning. Clytemnestra stood at the palace gates, dressed in her finest robes, her face arranged in an expression of joy that fooled everyone but those who knew her well. She had waited 10 years for this moment, not with longing, but with hatred. Pure and patient and absolute. She had nursed it since the day Agamemnon sailed for Troy, not because he left, but because of what he did before leaving. The ships becalmed at Aulis. The priests demanding sacrifice. And Iphigenia, the king's own daughter, walking to the altar in her wedding dress, believing she was going to marry Achilles. Clytemnestra had not been allowed to watch the end. They had dragged her away, screaming, clawing at the men who held her. She had heard her daughter cry out for her mother, and then silence. When she broke free and ran to the altar, Iphigenia was gone. The priests claimed Artemis had taken her, replaced her with a deer at the last moment. Clytemnestra did not believe them. She had seen the knife in her husband's hand. She had seen the look in his eyes, the cold calculation of a man who would sacrifice anything for his war. Whatever the priests said, whatever lies they told to ease their guilt, she knew the truth. Agamemnon had been willing to murder their daughter. He had raised the blade. He had made the choice. Whether the goddess intervened or not, his soul was already damned. And now the ships were returning. Now the reckoning would come. Agamemnon descended from his chariot like a god made flesh. 10 years of war had aged him, but his pride burned brighter than ever. Behind him came Cassandra, the Trojan prophetess, his prize, his slave. The sight of her made Clytemnestra's eyes narrow for just a moment before the mask slipped back into place. "My lord and husband," she called out, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "Welcome home. I have prepared a hero's greeting for the conqueror of Troy." She gestured, and servants unrolled bolts of purple cloth, fabrics worth their weight in gold, dyed with the shells of 1,000 murex snails. They formed a path from the chariot to the palace doors. "Walk upon these," Clytemnestra said. "Let your feet touch nothing common. You have earned the tribute of kings." Agamemnon hesitated. Purple was the color of gods. To walk upon it was to claim divine honors, to invite the jealousy of Olympus. "This is too much," he said. "Such displays are for immortals, not men. You have done what no man has done before. You have broken the walls of Troy. Surely the gods will forgive a moment of celebration." The choice hung in the air. He weighed options, the safe humility of refusal against the intoxicating pleasure of receiving his due. He had sacrificed everything for this victory. He had spent 10 years in foreign dust. Surely he deserved something for his suffering. Pride won. Pride always won. Agamemnon stepped onto the purple cloth. Behind him, Cassandra began to scream. "Blood!" she shrieked. "I smell blood. The house reeks of it, old blood, new blood, blood that has not yet been spilled." She pointed at the palace with trembling hands. "There is death waiting inside. The net is ready, the blade is sharp." The guards seized her. They had heard she was a prophetess, but everyone knew her curse, to speak true words that no one would believe. Her screams faded as they dragged her toward the slave quarters. Agamemnon walked the purple path, step by step, toward the doors his wife held open. He did not look back. The palace swallowed him whole. Clytemnestra led her husband through halls he had not seen in a decade, pointing out improvements, making small talk about the kingdom's affairs. Her voice was honey. Her eyes were stone. In the great hall, she had prepared a feast, roasted meats, fine wines, musicians playing songs of victory. Agamemnon ate and drank with the appetite of a man who had survived a war. He laughed at jokes, accepted toasts, basked in the adulation of courtiers who had spent 10 years wondering if their king would ever return. He did not notice how few of his old companions were present. He did not notice the new faces among the servants, Aegisthus's men, planted throughout the palace over years of careful planning. Aegisthus had come to Mycenae 3 years after Agamemnon sailed, claiming to be a distant cousin seeking refuge. Clytemnestra had welcomed him, and within months, he had become far more than a guest. He was her lover, her ally, her partner in the plan that was about to unfold. Together, they had rehearsed this night 1,000 times. "You must be exhausted, my lord," Clytemnestra said as the feast wound down. "I have prepared a bath for you, hot water, scented oils, everything a weary warrior needs." Agamemnon smiled. "You have thought of everything. I have had 10 years to think." She led him to the bath chamber. The room was filled with steam, the great bronze tub gleaming in the lamplight. Agamemnon stripped off his armor, his weapons, his defenses. He lowered himself into the water with a sigh of pure contentment. Finally, he murmured, "Peace." Clytemnestra stood behind him, holding something concealed in the folds of her robe. Her voice, when she spoke, had changed, no longer honey, but ice. "Do you remember Iphigenia?" Agamemnon's eyes snapped open. "What?" "Our daughter. The one you dragged to the altar at Aulis. Do you remember her face when she realized you had tricked her? When she understood that her own father had brought her to die? He tried to rise, but she was faster. The net came down over his head, woven bronze, impossible to tear, pinning his arms, trapping him in the water. Clytemnestra. She called for me. Her voice shook now, 10 years of grief pouring out. She screamed for her mother while the priests held her down. And you held the knife. You made the choice. Whatever the gods did after, you were willing to kill her. Aegisthus emerged from the shadows, an axe in his hands. "Please," Agamemnon thrashed in the net, but there was no escape. The priests said Artemis took her. She lives. Lies. Clytemnestra's scream echoed off the stone walls. Lies to ease your conscience. You stood at that altar ready to spill her blood. You chose your war over your child. That is the truth I have lived with for 10 years. I had no choice. The gods demanded, you always have a choice. Her face twisted with rage and sorrow. And you chose wrong. The axe fell. The King of Kings, conqueror of Troy, commander of 1,000 ships, died tangled in a net, trapped in his own bath, struck down by the wife he had wronged. Clytemnestra stood over the body of her husband, her robes marked by his ending, her face transformed by something that was not quite triumph and not quite peace. Iphigenia, she whispered. Whether you live or died that day, you are avenged. The queen did not hide her crime. She walked out of the bath chamber with Aegisthus at her side and addressed the assembled household. The king is dead, she announced. I killed him. I make no apology and offer no excuse, only justice, long delayed but finally delivered. The courtiers stared in horror. Some reached for weapons. Others fell to their knees. None seemed able to comprehend what they were seeing, the queen of Mycenae, confessing murder without a trace of shame. He would have sacrificed our daughter, Clytemnestra continued. He held the knife at Aulis, ready to spill her blood so his ships could sail. The priests claim Artemis saved her, but he did not know that when he raised the blade. In his heart, he murdered her. And for 10 years, I have carried that knowledge like a stone in my chest. Silence. The truth of her words settled over the hall like ash. I waited, she said. I waited and I planned and I made myself into a weapon. Every night for 10 years, I dreamed of my daughter on that altar. Every morning, I woke to remember what he was willing to do. And when the beacon fires announced his return, I knew the hour had finally come. She looked out at the kneeling courtiers with eyes that had seen too much. They say the war is over. They are wrong. The war simply moved, from the plains of Troy to the halls of the victors. Agamemnon burned a city for a stolen woman. Now he has paid the price in his own blood. This is what victory looks like. This is what the gods have given us. Aegisthus stepped forward, raising his voice. From this day, I rule Mycenae alongside the queen. Any who oppose us will share Agamemnon's fate. Any who serve loyally will be rewarded. Choose now. One by one, the courtiers knelt. What else could they do? The king was dead. His army was scattered across the seas, still struggling homeward. There was no one to challenge the new order. From the slave quarters came a final scream, Cassandra, the prophetess who had tried to warn everyone. She had seen this ending before it happened. Now she shared the fate of the king she had been given to. Clytemnestra watched the courtiers bow and felt something she had not felt in a decade, release. The wound that had festered since Aulis was finally clean. The war was over. She had won. Night fell over Mycenae. Clytemnestra stood on the palace balcony, looking out over the kingdom that was now truly hers. The beacon fires had burned out. The celebration had faded. The body of Agamemnon had been wrapped and prepared for burial, a king's burial, despite everything, because even murderers must observe the forms. Aegisthus joined her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "It is done," he said. "After all these years, it is finally done." Yes. But her voice held no joy. Only exhaustion, and something that might have been emptiness. "You should rest. Tomorrow we must address the council, establish our authority, send messages to the other kingdoms. I know what must be done." She turned to face him. "I have been planning this for 10 years. I know every step that follows." "Then why do you look so troubled?" Clytemnestra was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was distant. "I thought it would feel different. I thought when he was finally dead, I would feel free. Instead, I feel as though I have swallowed something poisonous that will never leave my body. That will pass. In time, will it?" She looked at her hands, the hands that had held the net, that had watched the axe fall. "I have become what he was. A killer who justifies murder with necessity. He said the gods demanded Iphigenia. I said justice demanded him. How are we different?" Aegisthus had no answer. Below the balcony, the palace servants moved through their duties, carefully avoiding the bath chamber where their king had died. Life continued, as it always did, regardless of who sat on the throne or whose blood stained the stones. Clytemnestra thought of her children. Electra, sullen and silent, already looking at her mother with eyes full of accusation. And Orestes, young Orestes, sent away years ago for his own safety, growing up in a foreign court, learning to be a man far from his mother's influence. What would he think when he heard what she had done? What would he become? A cold wind blew across the balcony, carrying the scent of smoke from the dying beacon fires. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howled at the moon. "The curse of this house is not finished," Clytemnestra murmured. "I can feel it. We have added another link to the chain, not broken it. You speak of curses and chains. I speak of power and security." Aegisthus pulled her close. "We rule Mycenae now. Whatever comes, we face it together. She let herself lean against him, taking what comfort she could. But in the darkness beyond the torchlight, she could almost see them gathering, the Furies, the spirits of vengeance, patient as stone. They had watched Agamemnon walk the purple path to his doom. Now they watched her. The wheel of fate had turned. A daughter had been taken to an altar. A father had been struck down in his bath. And somewhere, far from Mycenae, a son was growing older. The war was over. But the House of Atreus had not finished paying its debts. Clytemnestra closed her eyes and listened to the wind, and tried not to think about what the future held. She had won. So why did victory taste so much like ash?